Okay, so this is the second book that I wanted to talk about as part of this spotlight session. And this book is talking about coins that are much more recent than the ancient coins that were in the first book that we talked about. This, in fact, isn't really talking about coins particularly, it's talking instead about tokens. And this is, as I say, the title of this particular spotlight session was Books About Coins and Tokens. I thought I would make sure that I put in at least one book that was on tokens rather than coins. Now, tokens, of course, are objects which have value and circulate like coins, but are not guaranteed by the state or guaranteed by the weight of the metal that's in them. So tokens are like coins, but not quite. They're sort of like unofficial coins. And there have been two periods in recent British history when tokens became really common and were circulating in the country as if they were proper coinage. And this book talks about the first of those two periods, which was in the mid to late 17th century. So at that period, there was a shortage of small change that had been produced by the Royal Mint. So people were finding it difficult to have the small coins they needed to pay for their everyday transactions. So lots of people in localities across the country started to create their own tokens. And they're really, really interesting from a historical point of view because they usually have the name of the person and the type of business that they owned, together with, the value, which was usually a halfpenny or a penny. So this work here is a work that was published in 1884. It's one of many works that were studying these coins. So this is a numismatic work, similar to the previous one. It's a book that's talking about the study of coins. And this one was written by John Topless. John Topless was a Nottingham man, and he was a quite well-renowned numismatist for the area. I've had a look in our records. He doesn't seem to have been a member of Bromley House, unfortunately. However, he was the council rate collector. So there are records in within our papers of him collecting the rents for Bromley House. So he's kind of tangentially related to us, even though he wasn't actually a member. I think this book was donated by him to the library, though. So this is a book that talks about one particular set of these 17th century tokens, and this is the ones from Nottinghamshire. So these were the ones that were known of in 1884. So Topless wrote this book. It's been bound... there is a inscription that shows that he did present it to Bromley House Library at the point of it being published. It's been bound in a rather strange way. It was bound by Derrys, who are still... Derrys were our go-to bookbinders for a long time, and we still work with one of the people who used to work at Derrys. But it's been interleaved with lined pages of the sort that you find in a school exercise book. Again, it's a very strange book. It's another one that I haven't really seen anything like this before. But the text itself is relatively interesting. It's an explanation of the tokens, and then it has a list of the different towns and the inscriptions that you find on the tokens. And at the very back, we have some illustrations of some of the tokens. So these are life size. This is the size that you would find these tokens. Each one of these is one coin. It shows the front and the back, so rather than two coins. And you can see that they have different designs on the front. They name usually the person, and then they say where they are. So this one, for instance, says Joseph Wright in Nottingham. And then on the back, we've got IW, which is his initials. That one's got a fantastic goose on it. Sometimes they have the date, 1667 on that one. They flourished in the kind of early years of Charles II's reign. So they're often 1667, 1668, 1669. You occasionally find ones which reference the king, but mostly they very specifically avoided that so that they weren't accused of forging coins that they wanted to pass as real coins. Things like this are quite interesting. Where do I see it here? So this here has WGF in a triangle. And this arrangement of letters tends to indicate that the person who issued it was a nonconformist, because the nonconformists tended to say that the man and woman within a marriage should be equal. obviously it's within relative terms of the 17th century. But what it meant was that when they were writing their initials, they would put the surname at the top, W, which in this case is Wild, and then they would put the initials of the man and his wife on the same level below the initial of the surname. So when you see these, they're really interesting from the point of view of telling us that there was somebody called Garvas Wild who was a tradesman in Nottingham, but they also point out that he was probably a nonconformist in his religious views as well. So yes, these tokens are fantastic, really interesting. John Topless himself made a big collection of these tokens, and when he died in 1890, I believe, yes, 1890, when he died in 1890, his collection of all his coins and tokens was auctioned off. Many of them ended up in the collections of Nottingham City Museums. So the numismatic collection within the museums was substantially founded on either large bequests or donations, and one of them was part of John Topless's collection. So some of the tokens that we see illustrated in this book here, you would be able to actually see within the collection at Nottingham City Museums.